Viruses also have been identified in schizophrenia as a possibility, but very importantly, Epstein-Barr mononucleosis is now believed the cause probably of multiple sclerosis. Again, it's an antibody action that gets on overdrive that stimulates the immune system to cause an autoimmune illness such as multiple sclerosis. Why does your child have this issue? What would make them different than the next person who gets strep? Well, there's a number of things we know about these illnesses, including almost all autoimmune illnesses. One is genetic predisposition. And this is true, actually, this part is very true in autism, which I also know of, I believe, is a lot of inflammation in kids with autism. So family members have a higher rate of psychiatric illnesses. They also have a higher rate of immune illnesses. So allergies, Hashimoto's symptoms, lupus, multiple sclerosis, strep, etc. The sex difference is great. Males have a much higher rate of PANDAs than females. This is PANDA's data, but my experience is not true in the office. I see at least as many females, if not more some days. You have gene mutations that happen. They're just starting to do genome testing and looking. There's a consortium of people from all around the world when we meet together for meetings that is working on trying to do this. Exposure to illness. If you get a strep infection, yeah, you have a strep infection, you get it treated. What happens if you have 3 in a row? That happened to somebody I know recently. What happens if you get strep? Then you get a norovirus, then you get COVID exposures, and then your family exposes you to the flu. So you've already got your antibodies stirred up, and now you got all these other antibodies being presented to you. I mean, you're getting illness spread droplet-wise, and your antibodies are just climbing. And so sometimes it's a sequential issue of illnesses, not just a single event. If you have strep and a single event puts you over the cliff, I have gone back and said, yeah, but let me talk to you about the pneumonia and the family illness 3 months ago. I had a family call me desperate because their son was extremely ill, had been hospitalized on and off for the last year and a half, really, really suicidal. And I said to the dad, by chance, did anybody have COVID in your family about 3 months before he went off? They go, yeah, how did you know? How I know is because that is the sequence I see with COVID. Really rapid deterioration, but a lot of eating restrictive orders as well, and suicidality. And also environmental issues, really important. Tick-borne illnesses are really bad immune disruptors. Mold is really bad immune disruptor. And we are living in a very toxic world. An example is glyphosate. And I didn't spell that right. That's an S right in there. It's an herbicide. It's sprayed on all grains you eat, unless you eat organic grains. It kills off weeds and grasses. So every soy, every corn patch is sprayed with this. It's also sprayed on it again to dry it up before they harvest it. So now we have glyphosate, and some people do not get rid of it. They don't detoxify it very well. It affects gut bacteria. It disrupts neuroimmune endocrine. It inhibits fats and protein digestion. It leads to inflammation, GI issues, and behavioral changes. So there are huge issues with and we can't always know these. There is some testing for this, but I, honest to God, don't know what I do with it if I knew it was positive. I'm sure there are people out there who do. But it's important to understand the toxicity. So as much as you can, get a hold of Environmental Working Group, what they call the Dirty Dozen, which is the fruits and vegetables you do not want to buy if it's not organic, which exposes you to a lot more pesticides. And then trying as much as you can to use non-GMO food and non-hormonal driven. What is the roadblock to diagnosis? You can imagine now why it's hard to diagnose. Most practitioners are not literate. And often the PCP is the first contact, then they send you to psychiatry and neurology. Neurology, especially if ticks are involved. And medical testing is just not thought of. You have a tick, go to see a neurologist. You have a psych problem, go to see a psychiatrist. Sometimes also, as I mentioned, the initial symptoms are not as severe, and then it's later on that things start to really snowball. And then by then, everything else is blamed on another diagnosis. I've had some kids who are unbelievably ill in consultation, and it was blamed on the fact they were bullied and that the parents got divorced. And I'm thinking, a person does not lose 50 IQ points because they're bullied. They might lose in depression some verbal IQ points, but not visual motor. I mean, bullying doesn't harm your visual motor skills. And many doctors still believe that PANDAS doesn't exist. It's, quote, controversial. There's an article about this in terms of example, but very importantly, for those who have not already heard and been horrified, the Academy of Pediatrics finally came out with a statement about PANS being real. The last publication I used to show on this slide was 2017, where it was highly questionable. However, the way they decided to present it is they cherry picked through the data. They presented mostly what was true in 2012, which is you have to have a strep throat. You have to see it as a strep throat. If it doesn't look red, you're not even swabbing it. If it's not positive, you should not order meds. Not order blood work and not put them on any more than 10 days of antibiotic. Amen. It's good that they finally said it really is real, so they don't denigrate you so much. But in fact, the rest of it's pretty horror show. And I know a lot of you were traumatized by just reading the document. This is I used to show a lot of research, but I'm just going to refer you to the fact that this website, the Aspire website, is a wonderful collection of any and everything you want to know about an article. If you, by the way, see something before it's published in there, Gabrielle True, I'm sure, would be loving to have you send it to her so she can post it. What do parents fear? They fear a lot. They fear violent and dangerous behavior, how incapacitated their child is. I call it the invasion of the body snatchers. Where did your child go? Because it's not the one sitting in front of you. The symptoms returning, the flares, cause lots of primary post-traumatic stress. There is not one person, I believe, in this world who is a parent who has a child with PANDA that is not traumatized by it. Children are traumatized by it. Luckily, they do not remember as much about it, especially when it's severe. Their memory is kind of shaky, but yours is not. You remember everything. They also do remember not being able to think clearly, write, read. They have some irrational behaviors. Many of them have lost their friends. They've lost their life. They go, they aren't in school for 2 or 3 years, or they have to change to a sped school. And they have all sorts of medical interventions, psychiatric medication trials that often are unpleasant, etc. I want to point out that these slides are also produced by Melissa Glenn Hyman, a wonderful therapist who's really great at helping families in this field. And some of these things are from her. And family impact is huge. Everything, they see and hear everything. Siblings are really impacted because they see and hear everything that's going on, and they often lose attention. They often lose time with their family. They've lost their family dynamic that used to be their family. The marital stress is huge. Often one parent is often the mother, sometimes the dad is home managing the behavior. They've stopped working because they can't have both parents working. The financial costs are huge. And there's a lot of discipline agreements. Is this willful or is it not? Now, especially when you're coming out of an illness state or a flare, it's very raggy. It's kind of like one day they're good and one day they're not. So then there's a sense of, well, they did it yesterday. This must be willful if they can't do it today. And are the family extended giving you support? Many of them are critical. Many of them are just telling you you're a bad parent. If you just discipline them more, they would go to school. They would get dressed. They would and they don't get it. Another thing is the impact is controversial, as I mentioned, and you're really being told the normal child is now a psychiatrically ill child, and they're kind of describing illnesses that are chronic, like they're going to have this the rest of their life, especially if it's bipolar or schizophrenia. And you're fighting for their life. You're fighting for their life, especially if they are always talking about suicide or they're doing very dangerous things. A common feature is trying to jump out of a moving car on a highway. It may not be that the child wanted to at all kill themselves, but they're panicked. They're panic stricken. They lose all sensibilities and they try and jump out of the car. Or grab your steering wheel. That's another one. The impact on the families I mentioned is huge. And parents need support and not blame, not derogatory sentences from their doctors. Support, assistance, navigating resources, information, partnership. We have looked at Foundation. We have PANDA's Network, which gives a lot of support and a lot of information for this. And you yourselves are out there helping each other so much. The roadblocks at school are equally daunting. They can be identified as PANDAs, and then they show up at school, but they're not always easy to identify, especially if the behavior is mostly at home. In a medium level OCD, the child will button it up, bring it to school, sit on it all day, and come home and display it in great, huge colors. Same one with tics. Tics are suppressible. A child can tick, tick, tick. You get into school, the teachers say, no, we don't see any tics. Then they come home and they tick, 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 and you go, what is wrong? Am I just at this willful? Why am I seeing it and they don't see it in school? If they have OCD, they're quiet, they're covering it up. They're working really hard so they come home exhausted, and that means more rage because they've been working really hard to manage that OCD in the classroom and not look strange. Communication is not often extensive enough. It's hard right now for teachers. It's hard for everybody, but they often don't hear you, or they hear and you go, oh yeah, we know about PANDS, but their behavior does not support that statement. Many of them have already had IEPs or 504s, but if your child's never had one, this is a whole new language. You don't even have an idea where to begin. What is the difference of those things? How do I ask for help? The other thing is often the schools switch. So even within the same district, if they've gone from middle school to high school and now they're different, there's nobody who knows that. Particularly grade school to middle school. They don't know what the child was like. If it's a second grader that's now acting out as a fourth grader, the school knows something's different and the nurse knows something different. But if you switch schools or you've switched even up to a different grade level, a different building, that history is not communicated. It's not, they don't bother to tell you the kid was wonderful. You don't hear about it because the kid just came to your classroom. They have all sorts of issues. I've mentioned a lot of them. These are more descriptive of them. But they also have a lot of difficulty with their visual motors and art and creativity. They have huge sensory issues, so they don't want to go to cafeterias, art, music, any of it. They can't stand it. Gym. Oh, huge gym one. Visit. They have a lot of perfectionism. They also rip their homework up, hide it. They don't tell you they've got it. They're unable to make decisions. And here's there's a book I refer to in the bottom. I just remembered. I just put two of these. I hope it's in order. These are some essential things that one wants to communicate. These are essential ideas, what kind of plan you think on plans. There's also lots of this out there about the kind of things you put into an IEP or 504 plan. And these two I've adapted from her book and a lecture I heard from her give many years ago. This slide should have been up there with fear for parents. This is the parent slide. Practitioners lack information. I've already spoken that. But in addition to that, they do not listen to you. They have seen this child. They've raised this child as a pediatrician for 8 years. And now the child's under their table acting weird. They have this look in their eyes that's totally off. It's not looking like the same child. They've missed it. Their eyes are dilated. And they're just saying, oh, it's okay, mom. Or it's like, yeah, they just need to go to a psychiatrist now or a social worker. And, well, let's call it separation anxiety disorder. Let me give you a little Prozac. Now, that may be all true, but that often doesn't work real well. But one parent, when she went back to a doctor and he said, why are you going to that so-and-so person? It wasn't me, but it was another treatment center. They're just quack. You just walk in and they spend your money. And the mother bravely said to her, Dr. So-and-so, please don't degrade my ability to, everything you tried did not work. So please do not denigrate me trying to help my child. You shut up. Most parents don't even say that. They just leave that practice and they disappear from that practice because they have to go find somebody that is not going to denigrate them. There's lack of resources, lack of compassion, the blame for the child's behavior. Women, especially moms. I can't even begin to tell you the horror stories, but I'll give you a couple examples. You're in the emergency room, Mass General, which has the PANDAS clinic, mind you, and the psychiatrist says, I really think this is because of your OCD, that your child is head to toe ticks. So if you could go home and fix that, that would be great. You're not heard. Emergency services are really ineffective. And just to go to emergency room now is a hazard to anybody's health. And psychiatric units often dose very high because their goal is to stabilize your child and get them out of there. So they're often very aggressive with those medications. How does it display in school? This is really interesting because it's not quite what you would imagine. As I mentioned, remember the OCD is not coming out necessarily, the tics they would see, but not as much as at home. So it's a lot of obsessive behavior, erasing, reassurance seeking. They keep asking questions. In SPED schools, they're just more class to the staff, so they're kind of keep asking questions. They're very distracted. They get stuck on tasks. They avoid things. They shut down a lot. They just put their head on the desk and stop working. And their physical complaints are often very high at this point. So they do have real stomach aches. They do have real joint pain. They do have real back pain. But everybody's saying to them, this is your anxiety. They have a stomach pain. That's because they have anxiety. They have a headache. That's because they have anxiety. So now you keep getting directed back to the psychiatrist.